I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or urban legends, but after what happened last Halloween, I'm not so sure anymore. That night, my friends and I decided to play a scary challenge, the Count the People in the Photo game. The idea was simple. We would take a group picture in a supposedly haunted place. If there were more people in the photo than in real life, it meant someone else had joined us. It sounded ridiculous, but we chose a place that was anything but ordinary, an abandoned cemetery on the outskirts of town. There were six of us. We arrived at around 11 p.m. The air was cold and heavy with the scent of damp earth. The graves were old and covered in moss, and the streetlights were too far away to provide any real illumination. The only light came from the pale moon above. As soon as we stepped in, I felt uneasy. We lined up and took our first picture with my phone. One of my friends was holding the camera, so naturally the photo only showed five of us. Nothing strange. Then I placed my phone on a flat gravestone, set the timer mode, and ran back to stand with the group. I counted again, six people. The camera flashed. We laughed, thinking the game was just a stupid internet trend, but when we looked at the picture, my blood turned cold. There weren't six people, there were seven. We froze. In the picture, there was an extra person standing behind us, taller than everyone else, wearing a long black coat. But the worst part, his face wasn't there. It was just a void, a dark, empty space where a face should have been. I immediately turned around. There was no one behind us, nothing but tombstones and darkness. A gust of wind blew past, rustling the dry leaves. One of our flashlights flickered wildly. "Run!" Someone screamed, and we bolted for the car. We jumped in, slamming the doors shut. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my seatbelt. My heart was pounding. We were safe now, right? But then I felt something was wrong. I looked around at my friends. There were six of us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone else in the car with us. Slowly, I turned my head toward the back seat. There, sitting between two of my friends, was a man in a black coat with no face, just an empty, dark void where his face should have been. I screamed. Everyone screamed. The car doors flung open on their own. The streetlight outside suddenly flooded the area with light, and he was gone. We sped away from the cemetery, too terrified to speak. The next morning, I checked my phone again. The photo was still there, but this time, he was standing closer. I deleted it immediately, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Since that night, I never take group pictures in the dark anymore. And if you ever try this challenge, make sure you only see the number of people who were actually there, because sometimes someone else is waiting to join. I always thought Halloween was just a fun night, a time for kids to dress up and collect candy while adults partied. But 4 years ago, on the night of October 31st, something happened that made me never want to stay home alone on Halloween again. That year, I was home by myself. My roommate had gone to a party, and I wasn't in the mood for crowds. I put on a horror movie, grabbed some popcorn, and settled in for a quiet night. Around 11 p.m., just as I was starting to feel drowsy, someone knocked on my door. Knock, knock, knock. I jumped. Who would be visiting at this hour? I peeked outside the window. The street was empty. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, and there hadn't been any trick-or-treaters that night. Maybe it was a neighbor needing help. I went to the door and opened it. No one was there. Only a cold gust of wind that carried the damp scent of fallen leaves. I stepped out, looked left and right, but the street was completely deserted. I shut the door. Probably just some kid pulling a prank. But then, knock, knock, knock. The same, slow, deliberate knocking. This time I felt it, the unmistakable sense that something was very wrong. I looked through the peephole. Outside, a man stood there. He wore an old black suit, unnaturally tall and thin. His face was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes were pure black, absorbing all light. But what made my blood run cold, he wasn't facing the door. He stood with his back to me, staring into the street. I did not open the door. He remained still, silent. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Then, in a low, hoarse whisper from the other side of the door, he spoke, "I know you're watching." My body froze. How did he know I was looking? I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my ears. I waited, motionless. Minutes passed. Finally, I gathered the courage to check the window again. He was gone. I locked every door, shut the curtains, and told myself it was just my imagination. But as I turned away, I heard a soft knock on my bedroom window. Knock, knock, knock. I did not turn around. I stood there holding my breath, listening. The knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, steady, waiting. I don't remember how long I stood frozen, but when the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, the knocking stopped, and I never looked out the window that night. And since that Halloween, I leave town every year on October 31st because I know he's still looking for me.